Everybody, focus.
It's like...
Oh my... We're coming, man!
Nerdrotic.com.
It's been 4,064 days since the release of the last book in the A Song of Ice and Fire series, A Dance with Dragons. And it's been 1,205 days since the disastrous finale of Game of Thrones Season 8.
Best season ever!
And here we are finally talking about the House of the Dragon because I'm a little late on this, a show that's currently delaying Winds of Winter based on a book that delayed Winds of Winter. Before we get to the review, we do have an update from George R. R. Martin about the Winds of Winter. And it sounds pretty good, even though he should have been done with the book by now. I hope to wrap up the storyline for one of the viewpoint characters of Winds of Winter this week, maybe even two. That's great news. Then he follows it up with this. Meanwhile, work continues on all of the other Game of Thrones successor shows we're developing for HBO and HBO Max. I don't even want to finish. House of the Dragon is based on another unfinished book series, Fire and Blood Part 1, but this story does have an ending, and it's not very good because it's not one of George's best works. As a matter of fact, it's his worst in all of A Song of Ice and Fire. The book is a fake history written by a maester who is an unreliable narrator, sourcing 3 unreliable narrators. On top of that, the Dance of the Dragons story from inside Fire and Blood is based on short stories that have been massively retconned. But showrunner Ryan Condell has assured us that this will not be an unreliable narrator story. We will get the definitive history except for the stuff they get wrong. The episode starts immediately with the Great Council of 101, which was called by the conciliator King Jaehaerys, who has reigned for over 50 years, but he is left without an heir, so he decided to let the realm choose one for him. And when I say the realm, I mean the Citadel, the Sept, and the Great Lords. And immediately the show gets something wrong, at least from Fire and Blood. The final 2 claimants are Viserys Targaryen and Laenor Valerian, Rhaenys' son. Now, Rhaenys does have the better claim, which I don't think they explain very well in this show, but she gets passed over because she's a woman, because we're in a patriarchal, feudalistic society. Now, you would think that HBO is painfully aware of the reaction to Game of Thrones Season 8, so maybe let this new show gain an identity of its own, and let's not, no, never mind, they just give us a blonde girl and a dragon. Now, the bulk of this show is setup, and I guess our 3 main characters are Rhaenyra Targaryen, Alicent Hightower, and Daemon Targaryen. Only one of the 3 will be played by the same actor. We're 9 years into King Viserys' reign, and he is left without a clear heir, a son. His wife, Aemma Arryn, is pregnant currently, but she's already lost 3 children, 1 in the cradle and 2 during childbirth.
Well, here you are, surrounded by attendants, all focused on the babe. Someone has to attend to you.
Now that line sounds like it was written by a male feminist. Attending the baby is attending the mother. What do you expect her to do? Go down to the pub in King's Landing, have a couple of smokes, some pints, and maybe go to Westeros Cella? Aemma Arryn responds to her daughter Rhaenyra with a quote from famous feminist Randall Tarley: "The birthing bed is our battlefield." And yes, they're laying on the whole patriarchy thing pretty thick, and I am completely aware of the kind of messages and themes George R. R. Martin puts in his books, but as much as I criticize him, the man is not heavy-handed as this. The show settles down a little bit, and we finally get some character introduction and some exposition. There's a small council scene with some getting to know you. Half of these lords will be gone because there's a major time jump. And to address the elephant in the room, Corlys Velaryon, whose beard hair doesn't match the hair on his head. And we meet the best character in this show by far, Matt Smith's Daemon Targaryen sitting on the Iron Throne, meant to remind us of Jaime Lannister sitting on the Iron Throne. And yes, this is the first time we get to see the throne room, and it is different, and it looks terrible. This is what the Iron Throne is supposed to look like in the books, and why not just do this? Now, it sounds like I'm being a little hard on the show. I actually don't think it was that bad. It has some pretty cringe dialogue at times, and it has some brilliant scenes. It looks great. It's already better than The Rings of Power, but that's not really saying much. Now, we were told this show would try to be more book accurate in some ways. Yes, you can clearly see the banners, and there's much more pageantry with the houses, and in some ways, no, including a werewood in King's Landing. Too bad Sansa missed that one. Also in this scene, they're trying to insinuate that there's a bit of a crush between Rhaenyra and Alicent, and that one's new too. There's a scene between Viserys and Aemma that obviously sets up something much bigger later, where she tells him she can't have any more kids. She's managed to have one, she's lost 3, and that's it. But there is one line that I guess in current year could be considered controversial.
We do understand that nothing will cause the babe to grow a cock if it does not already possess one.
It wouldn't be Game of Thrones on HBO if we didn't get the first of our 2 gratuitously violent scenes. This one is with already fan favorite Daemon Targaryen, played by Matt Smith, and quite frankly, he's my favorite too. He was brilliant in this. He chewed up scenery and chopped off balls. They tried to fit a lot into the scene, and I know some people thought it was over the top, but this is a show directed by Miguel Sapochnik, the director of Battle of the Bastards. Now, Daemon Targaryen is the one that made the City Watch what it was. He gave them their gold cloaks. There's another getting to know you small council scene, this time focusing on Daemon Targaryen, and half the council obviously doesn't like him, including Otto Hightower. Now, they might have some good reason. They're worried he might be another Maegor the Cruel. Who was Maegor the Cruel? Just an all-around bad guy who was the king before Jaehaerys. He usurped the throne, destabilized the realm, and was generally cruel. So while Daemon Targaryen is going to obviously be the fan favorite Oberyn Martell meets Jaime Lannister, Otto Hightower might be our Tywin Lannister. Not too sure about that one. Ralph Fiennes is a great actor, but didn't really see it in this episode. One thing they made very obvious was the Hand of the King, but not the Lord of the Hightower. Otto doesn't like Daemon very much. Now, it wouldn't be Game of Thrones on HBO without boobs and booty, and we get it from the 11th Doctor. I did not expect to see 11th Doctor ass in this episode.
Who am I? Oh, I'm never saying that again. Fine.
And I'd really not like to see it again. Now, Daemon is getting down, but can't quite bring it home with Mysaria, or Lady Misery, or the White Worm, the unofficial mistress of Whisperers. Daemon's a little worried he's going to get passed up in the succession, and he has very good reason. King Viserys is so sure he's going to have a boy, he's already called a tournament with all the great lords coming to King's Landing to witness the birth of his male heir. And this is the big scene in the show where they intercut the tournament with the birthing scene.
With the birthing, it was the same. We really wanted to see the female perspective because it's a realistic portrayal of things that used to happen at the hands of men to women.
At this point, I would like to talk about any of the creatives who are working on this show. If you want your work to speak for itself, I would just focus on talking about your work and not trying to relate some of it to real world events that you obviously shot months, maybe even a year before that event actually happened. Stop virtue signaling, it just pisses people off. Despite the brain dead remarks from Miguel Sapochnik, I thought this scene could have been absolutely brilliant. Now, half of it was, the other half, it was okay. I like some of it, but on further review, tourneys are violent, and Targaryens can get away with whatever the hell they want. So yes, I could see Daemon Targaryen tripping a horse, and nobody would say jack shit about it. The only problem I guess I had was the cold-blooded murders of highborn knights. I think some houses would have some serious problems with that. I can certainly see 1 or 2 deaths during a tournament, but 5 or 6? The quote-unquote explanation for this from Rhaenys is some of that cringe dialogue I was talking about.
These nights are as green as summer grass. None have known real war. Their lord sent them to the tourney field with fists full of steel and balls full of seed.
The birthing scene, on the other hand, trying to keep out of my mind what Miguel Sapochnik, the director of The Long Night, said about it, was still brilliant and brutal. Meanwhile, back at the tourney, we're introduced to Sir Criston Cole along with Rhaenyra and Alicent, the son of a steward to Lord Dondarrion, who apparently now is Dornish. That's new as well. I guess we needed some Dornish representation. Now, the Maesters told Viserys that he had a very tough decision to make, either lose both the wife and the son, or just the son. Honestly, as cold-blooded as it sounds, that doesn't sound like a very hard decision. I think the mother would make the same decision. I liked the scene, and then I heard what Miguel Sapochnik said about it, and I felt a little differently. Now, this is where I will suggest to HBO, maybe you should just not have these post-show recaps with the directors. Did you kind of forget about Danny kind of forgot? King Viserys very sadly loses his wife and his son, and they have a funeral, and all the King's Guard decide to stand behind the funeral pyre. I also thought this was one of the better scenes with Daemon Targaryen because you see he does actually care about his family. Otto Hightower sends his very young daughter in to comfort the king, which is obviously setting something up, and King Viserys and I are kindred spirits. We both like our action figures and dioramas. Daemon decides to drown his sorrows or celebrate, and this was something that was left kind of ambiguous in the book, and it's not so ambiguous here. He does appear to toast his brother's dead son, Balon, the heir, for a day. Otto Hightower rats out Daemon to Viserys, and this is where the trouble begins. King Viserys summons Daemon to confront him about the heir for the day comment, and Daemon doesn't deny it, then follows it up by telling him the truth as he sees it about the small council, Otto Hightower, and then he calls him weak. King Viserys promptly names a new heir and sends Daemon back to the Vale to the wife he never liked. And his new heir is his daughter, Rhaenyra Targaryen, and I'm sure everything's just going to work out fine. And the final scene is Rhaenyra officially being named heir, the lords pledging fealty, and Daemon Targaryen leaving. And as King Viserys is talking to his daughter Rhaenyra, this is where we get the biggest change from the books. The discussion of the Song of Ice and Fire and The Long Night. Now, this was written completely for the show. This is a huge departure from the books, and it could be a massive Winds of Winter spoiler or just massive fan service. I'll try to keep this brief. The reason the Targaryens are on Dragonstone is Daenys the Dreamer foresaw the doom of Valyria. In the books, there's a lot of dreams and prophecies. Now, the Targaryens hung out on Dragonstone for a lot of years before they conquered Westeros, which they could have done whenever they wanted because they had dragons. Now they're saying that Aegon the Conqueror conquered Westeros because of his dream of the Long Night. Again, in the books, we have no idea why Aegon the Conqueror wanted to conquer Westeros, but this might explain it. This might also explain why Rhaegar Targaryen took off with Lyanna Stark. This might also explain why Aegon V wanted to hatch some dragon eggs, or the Mad King. Or it could just be fan service, which I think it probably is, because the previous two kings to Viserys, one was appointed and the other one usurped the throne. So how was the information passed to them? Again, this is not only a show that is currently delaying the book The Winds of Winter, the book it's based on delayed Winds of Winter, which made Game of Thrones a complete disaster, and this is still a prequel to that complete disaster. So no matter what happens, all roads lead to Game of Thrones Season 8. The show has potential to be really good or really cringe, especially if they lean into that study of toxic masculinity. It has some other problems too, including a huge time jump, meaning some characters you might get attached to are going to be played by completely different actors later on. And the one big difference, this one actually has an ending. It's just not a very good one. And I'm not sure what good it's going to do to bring up The Long Night other than to remind everybody about Game of Thrones. In this story, unless there's radical changes, you might see Winterfell, but you're not going to see the Wall. You're not going to see the lands of always winter, the Night's Watch, the White Walkers, the Others, any giants, any wildlings, nothing. Again, I was late on this one, and I could go on, but we have an entire season to cover. Overall, I thought the episode was slow at times, some cringe dialogue. It rallied towards the end, and Matt Smith was brilliant, and it still wasn't enough to wash away the stain of Game of Thrones Season 8. Yet I will be live after every episode with Mahler and other guests at 9:10 p.m. Central. Please join us then. If you like what you heard, please like, share, and subscribe. If you didn't like what you heard, I thank you for listening this long. I will see you in the next video.
Nerdrotic.com.
Bye.